Hey guys, I'm Weston, and I'm the current US National Champion of one-handed solving, and today I'll be doing a video on just a few tips and tricks on doing cross one-handed, because it is different from doing it two-handed. I think significant enough that it's worth making a video on. So I'll be talking about basically four different things that I think are the most significant things, that are the most useful also. The first one, there's not a lot to show, but it's just something to keep in mind, is that when you're doing two-handed cross, a lot of the times what you're trying to find is the shortest solution. And for one-handed, that's usually not the best thing to do, because for one-handed, it's more important to be able to execute those moves quickly than to be able to have a lower number of moves to execute. Just because in general moves are harder to execute, so it's better to find a slightly longer solution that has a much easier execution than to find a short solution that's really slow and difficult to execute. Something that kind of goes along with that first point is the first thing that I can give you examples on, and that is that you should always be trying to reduce your cross to 2-gen. And this is true with pretty much all of one-handed solving, where you just want to rotate and do 2-gen solving. For cross, it's almost the same thing, where you just want to set up moves and then 2-gen, and then maybe some setup moves after that. But as much as possible, you want it to be 2-gen. So I found a scramble on QQ Timer that kind of illustrates this. So here's the first scramble. I did it with cross on top. We have cross pieces here, 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 and here. And normally what people might do for two-handed is to hold it crossed like this, put that in, D2, start putting the red in, move the blue over, put those both in, and then finish it off. That's actually really bad for one-handed, so I'm going to redo the scramble and show you what generally you want to do for one-handed. So I re-scrambled just the cross. It was scrambled when I did it, so I just have the cross. Everything else is different. But the point of this scramble shows is that you can reduce this cross into 2-gen using just one move, and that's F prime. Once you do that, all of these cross pieces can be solved 2-gen. It won't be move efficient, but it'll be really fast to execute and really easy to execute. So I can just do from here. And so I only had one awkward move in that entire cross, and that was the first move. And this is pretty easy to plan out, actually, because you have a lot of time to plan your cross. So this is the first thing that you should always be looking for when you're solving one-handed cross, is just find some way to try to reduce the cross into exclusively 2-gen moves. This won't always be possible, but a lot of times it is, and it can make crosses a lot easier for you. And it's not something that you would normally want to do in two-handed, because it's not really that good, because two-handed you generally want to do the cross on the bottom, so you'd end up doing like RD or LD or something, and that's not really that good. But for one-handed, it's really good, because when you're doing one-handed solves, the cross doesn't need to be on the bottom. The cross can be anywhere. In fact, it's bad to always try to have the cross on the bottom. You just want to do the cross wherever it's the most convenient for your fingers. And so I have another example where it's not quite as clean as the other scramble, but it can still, the concept still applies, because you're reducing certain parts of the solve to 2-gen. So here's another scramble. It's not quite as clean as the other one, but I can see that for a cross on white, which is on the right, if I do a U prime move, that makes 3 of the cross pieces solvable by 2-gen from this angle. So I can just go ahead and do that, and then see, as I finish, I can just flip that F in, and then my cross was almost 2-gen. It's not quite as nice as the other example, but it's way better than the optimal solution that you would do for two-hand solving. So basically, most of the time you won't be able to reduce a cross to finish 2-gen after you do some moves at the start. A lot of times you'll have to do a move that isn't 2-gen in the beginning, and then have like a 2-gen segment in the middle, and then finish it off with something that isn't 2-gen. And that's okay, as long as you just try to make as much of the cross as you can 2-gen. And there's almost always a way to, like a pretty good way to do it. So that's the first thing you should be looking out for. The next thing you want to be thinking about is the hierarchy of cube rotations. And so in my mind, what it is that Z rotations are the best, X rotations are in the middle, and Y rotations are the worst. Or in other words, rotations like this are the best, rotations like this are second best or in the middle, and this rotation is the worst. So a lot of times in solves you'll have a solution, but it'll end up having to require you to do a Y turn. But a lot of times there's a way that you can manipulate the cube in order to make that a different type of rotation. And a lot of times this ends up this involves using lowercase turns or Y turns, and that's really helpful because Z rotations are way faster than Y rotations. So here's like a really simple cross. The solution is just this, but I see a lot of people do stuff like this where, like, okay, I'm gonna solve it kind of similar to what I would do for two-hand, where I just put the green in, do a Y rotation, do an L, do an R prime, and then do that. That's not good. That's not what you want to be doing because you have a Y rotation. So what I would do is, if I do this solution, where if I hold it like this, U prime, small R prime, then and then I have a Z rotation instead. And since that's a better solution because it has a Z rotation instead of a Y rotation. So another thing that you want to think about whenever you're planning out crosses is which rotations are you going to have to do. And if you have a lot of Y rotations, you might want to try to think of a way to make those into X rotations or Z rotations, or if you have any kind of rotation that isn't Z, then you want to try to make it into a Z somehow, as long as it doesn't make other stuff too awkward. Of course, it's always what's your best judgment given the time constraints that you have, the 15-second inspection. But you should always just try to use as many Z rotations as you can instead of X rotations or Y rotations. And a lot of times you can even eliminate rotations altogether. I see a lot of people doing solutions that give you rotations when they can pretty easily be doing non-rotations or just not have a rotation. And so here's a very simple 2-move cross. The solution is just F prime R or RF prime, whatever you want. So I see a lot of people will just like see this like, oh, I'm gonna do it like this and then rotate. That's bad. The real way that you want to be doing this that doesn't give you a rotation is to hold it like this, do U prime lowercase r. Then you have the same thing from a different angle, but you didn't have to do a rotation. And you might think, oh well, that scramble is never that cross scramble is very rarely going to come up. But actually that sequence of moves just appears in a lot of scrambles. Not only that, you can use this idea of just figuring out how you want to start holding the cube and how you want to use lowercase moves to manipulate your cross to give you nicer scrambles. Lastly, I'm just going to give you guys a couple random little tricks that I see a lot of people doing wrong. So a lot of people, when they see this case, they think, oh well, for two-handed I would do this, so I might do that for one-handed too. But that's bad because you have to do F moves and that's hard. What you want to do is this. So when it's on top here and flipped, you go R prime, lowercase U prime, R U. And that also works if it's like this, where it's actually in the spot. Instead of starting with an R prime, you just start with an R. And it's solved. There's one more variation of that, where the cross is a D2 off, and then this is in place like that. You can just go like that, and it's solved. And this doesn't always have to be for the last pair either. You can do this in the middle of a cross solve, especially if it'll help you get into a position that you want to execute your next moves in. So really, OH cross is all about thinking ahead to how the cube is going to be, how you're going to be holding the cube, and what rotations you're going to need to do. So on my main channel, the Westonian, I have a bunch of other OH videos, like just general how I turn, OH PLLs, just random F12 tricks. And so if you want, you can go check those out. And thanks for watching, guys. See ya.